Thank you guys for all joining us today for our webinar. This is probably, I believe this is our sixth or fifth in a series of webinars we have held to expand knowledge regarding the DoD's new CMMC rule or framework. Again, my name is Philip Denny. I'm president of U.S. GovCert. We are a provider of a SaaS tool to help the industry participants go through the CMMC process um, um, as efficiently as possible. Um, and I've been in government contracting for well, over 25 years, actually. We have three locations. We are headquartered in Minneapolis. We have an office in Alexandria, Virginia, and also another office in the Washington, D.C., in the New York City area. Um, this is a little about our tool. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. Again, this is an assessment tool to help you go through the compliance, help you achieve compliance on CMMC and a few other standards that the federal government typically uses. Um, Today, we have a list of our panelists for of the top minds in government cybersecurity, in particular CMMC contracting. CMMC cybersecurity issues. Our panelists again are Robert Ashcroft. Robert is president of CMMC Solutions, a division of Corporate Vision LLC. CMMC Solutions is dedicated to preparing the defense industrial base for cybersecurity challenges. He has some key patterns to his name. His firm has have experienced IT auditors and with considerable cybersecurity knowledge. They understand the complexity and inheritance requirements to pass an assessment. He is also currently an adjunct professor of cybersecurity at a university. And Robert, you can jump in and let me know. I apologize. I forgot the name of the university.
Kutztown University. It's in Pennsylvania, and I have two CMMC courses. They aren't for getting the students ready for certifications. It's to give them a good business knowledge of how the DIB works and how they can go and get ready and have a good business defense understanding.
Fantastic. Stephen Palomero. Stephen has over 25 years of experience in the tech industry and a degree in computer science and mathematics from Purdue University. He's a seasoned professional. Over the last 5 years, he has become a leading authority, I should say, in NIST 800-171 and CMMC compliance. He has collaborated with numerous organizations, helping them navigate the complex world of compliance and cybersecurity. Currently serving as the channel partner manager for CMMC Fast Track at Lifeline Data Centers. Steve specializes in leveraging virtualization technologies to streamline and enhance the CMMC compliance process. In this upcoming webinar, Steve and or other panelists will help unravel those over 400 pages that were, which are the final rules of CMMC framework. Chris Haig. Chris is the CEO of Meerkat Cyber, a firm dedicated to cybersecurity and the Department of Defense Cybersecurity Model Framework. As a trained aeronautical and astronomical engineer who complemented his undergraduate work with a law degree, Steve finds the marriage of technology and regulatory policy fascinating. So there's always one. So, during his 3-decade career, Chris has held roles including Senate Policy Analyst and Chief Technology Officer for a cybersecurity firm. And he has obtained the highest level of certification possible through the Department of Defense CMMC program, including Certified CMMC Assessor, Certified CMMC Professional, and Certified CMMC Instructor. He is currently among 42, I think that number may have increased a little, people in the world who can perform certified CMMC audits. He has spent decades as a technical writer, aside from authoring hundreds of patent applications for highly technical inventions. Chris is the named inventor on numerous patents and has served as a technical writer for Nobel laureates, international thought leaders, and numerous universities. Most recently, he has been engaged by Microsoft to write the CMMC implementation guide. Our final panelist, Kelly Kendall. Kelly is a service-disabled vet of the Marine Corps and the CEO and president of KNC, the Strategic Services. KNC is a cybersecurity service provider based in Carlsbad, California. They're an authorized C3PAO. Kelly is a certified assessor with over 30 years leadership experience, both in the military and in the corporate world. Kelly brings a unique blend of discipline, strategic thinking, and exact execution to cybersecurity management. His understanding of how to lead teams effectively translates into well-managed, well-executed cybersecurity programs for clients. We want to cover a few topics today. As you all know, over the past week or so, the DoD released the final rules, the final CFR 32 rules regarding the CMMC certifications. So we're going to touch upon, it's over 400 pages, so there's a lot to cover. We are going to touch upon those areas that we think are important, but we also welcome your questions. So without spending a lot more times on the slides, what we want to jump into quickly is Q&A. We have created a series of questions, or at least topics to discuss, that we want to bring to your attention. So I want to let the panelists now give a quick introduction to who they are and what they think is important to discuss, and we will open the floor to your questions. Essentially what we want this to be is to be very interactive. Ask all of your questions, and we'll answer them as best we can. Thank you very much, and take it over, Robert.
So, in trying to determine your certification level, you have to look at the contracts that you have with it. So as you're looking at it, you have your FCI, your federal contract information, and then the CUI. So with that, that's where a review, which I call the boundary, is the main item that will help you determine, one, what level you're at and what's really in scope. So that's where we look at, really, you could have a company of 50 people, but in the analysis, really only 10 people are involved with the defense work that are touching the FCI, CUI, and then as far as what applications do they use in performing their job, whether it's in manufacturing, their CNC machines, so they have different type of CAD applications that they work, AutoCAD or whatever, and then maybe the company might integrate the ERP system. So you put that as a bundle, and then you can go and then put the total package together on it and determine the level and the process and the need. Over
I think that the rule is over 400 pages. doubt very much if many people have had an opportunity to go through all of those pages. From your reviewing the rules, what jumps out at you? What did you expect to see that you did not see, or what's there that you were not expecting based upon the last 5 years of talk and discussion about the CMMC ruling?
On me again, or do you want to?
Anyone else can answer.
Yeah, want to pass over?
I'll tell you one of the big things that changed based on what the rule was proposed on December 26th of last year and what we saw just Friday and then was officially published Tuesday. ESPs, external service providers, big term and an important component of anybody trying to be compliant. Who do you use? What external service providers do you use to help you with your security, maybe as an MSP, maybe with other services that they provide? They used to be somebody or an entity that would need to be certified. They no longer are required. Big change, a departure from the rule. There were so many comments, mine included. I think several people on the panel here provided comments that the DoD considered as, okay, that is a big burden. So we are not going to require ESPs to be certified, but they can opt to be and they can volunteer to get that. There was no way to do it before because you had to have a government contract. So the ESPs were in this quandary where, hey, we're all supposed to go get certified, but we can't even do it. Now they don't have to, but there are business reasons why they may want to. What happens is whatever services they're providing that are covered by the rules, the 110 controls, those services will be certified, will be subject to the assessment. So if an MSP is providing services, for example, that fall underneath the scope of the rules, the controls, that MSP may want to go get certified anyway. Otherwise, they're going to have to continually prove with each client, hey, we are satisfying X, Y, and Z. Here are all the details that they have to provide. And then it's on the DIB contractor to present all that information to make sure that they don't fail the assessment. And the MSP may be asked to be present to confirm, yes, this is how we're doing it, because there will be interview questions that may be asked. Those kinds of things may prompt an MSP to want to go get certified anyway, just so that they can say, we don't even need to be there. Here's our certification.
Yeah, and really you're right, Chris, that's a game changer in this. We've been so I'm the channel partner over at Lifeline. We have a lot of MSPs and MSSPs we work with, and we've been telling them, according to the current rule, you need to get certified, right? And even C3PAOs, they've been lining up to get certified, creating a backlog. And the way the rule came out, if you don't store, transmit, or process CUI as an MSP, then you're out of scope. If you have an endpoint that does any of that, let's say you're VPNing into a system and you have access to either process or you have access to CUI, then that endpoint is in scope. Part of the way we take that out of scope is if you have rather than a VPN, you can access via VDI, then that endpoint is out of scope. We're going to talk about the VDI endpoints in a minute because there was a change there as well. But that is a game changer for MSPs.
Okay. We put up a poll to gauge where our audience is in terms of pursuing certification. We'll let you know what the results are towards the end. But I've got the feeling that everyone is going to be interested in identifying a consultant to help them go through the process pretty quickly if they haven't already started to do that. Kelly, I know that you've done some certifications. Anything different that you've seen in the rules versus what you were doing before to help your clients?
I think one overarching point that's really good to see is the DoD listened, and they got a lot of feedback, and we were, as a community, kind of nervous about, are they going to respond? Are they going to make changes? Are they going to keep it as is? And even though if you read through the rule and you read through their Q&A of responding to a lot of the public comments, some of them are pretty humorous. So someone who submitted marketing material for their company as a public comment, go figure. But the great thing is that they listened and they made really good, logical decisions on what to make changes on, like the one we just mentioned. I mean, that's huge in my opinion, because we really didn't know if they were going to and how it was going to play out. The cone of silence was very challenging, still is. So I think that's one huge point. It's just that they listened and made good changes. I think as an assessor, it's really important for us to be able to know what we're going into and be able to understand what we're going to be dealing with. And these changes make it so much easier. Now we don't have to sit there and think we have to check every single thing about making sure that MSP that they're using did this, and this. There's all this extra stuff now that we don't have to worry about, which means we get to focus on what really matters, which is assessing that client and assessing their network and making sure they're doing the things that they're supposed to be doing and that they say they're doing. So I think that's just kind of my overarching point on it.
Okay. One of the things that everyone on LinkedIn is talking about the date that these rules will go into effect. And it seems to be some confusion. I know it was released, the ruling was released about a week or so ago, and there was a 60-day deadline for when they actually were finalized. Could you talk a little bit about what that 60-day means? And when should the community expect to see CMMC as a part of the FAR in their contracts?
I can say one thing real quick is that if you Google what that means, they'll tell you, they'll give you an exact date. It came out on the 15th, right? So 60 calendar days is in December, right? So they give you an exact date. That's not actually the case. It is 60 calendar days that the congressional sessions are in. Congress isn't in session now. They won't be in session until after the election. So that is not the case yet. They can squeeze that down. So the perception is that they're going to get it done much quicker than that 60 days. They're going to get it done more like 30 days because they don't want to carry it into next year. So that's a perception, but they can carry it all the way into next year based off of how many congressional sessions are there. That's my 2 cents on it.
Okay. So the rules will be finalized 60 congressional days that Congress is in session. When should
days, yeah, they can, yeah.
When should
which would bring it all the way out to the end of Q1 of next year? But that's just that they have notoriously got it done much quicker, and in this instance, that's the perception.
Okay. When should the vendor community start to see it in their contracts and as a requirement for bidding on contracts? It seems as though there's just a small percentage of the community that are currently certified. So if this starts appearing in contracts, what does that mean? Only the handful of companies that are certified are going to get work, or what?
That's the somebody else want to take it? That's the whole Title 32, Title 48. You know, in the rule, it did say that you can start putting it in as soon as the rule goes live, right? 32, you can start putting CMMC in contracts now. So I did see that in the rule. Yet Title 48 is the specific rule that allows program managers and contract managers to start putting it into contracts.
Okay.
And that is supposed to go live Q3 of next year.
Okay.
Based off the timeline, which again could be condensed because it's not near as big a rule as 32. The one that
So
just came.
over 400 pages, are there any parts of the rule that you believe still need clarification?
Well, there was another one that came out on specifically somebody asked about virtual desktops, and that since that's our service offering, we have enclaves and virtual desktops. We have been telling people that those are out of scope, and it wasn't clarified in the rule. Well, they clarified it. So they said as long as the endpoint is locked down, you can't access the USBs, can't print, no keystroke, no key loggers can access the keystrokes. So as long as it's completely locked down, those endpoints are completely out of scope.
Okay.
So that was a huge change from a VDI standpoint.
Okay.
And Kelly, you had even mentioned that was treated by the previous rule. It was treated differently, right? It was viewed
Very differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, very differently. So the VDI is a big change and a big win for anybody providing any kind of a VDI-based solution. Yeah, very much so.
There's a question that came in that we were just talking about as far as they're still unclear as to when CMMC becomes a requirement. And is it possible to win the contract first and then complete the certification?
I can jump on that if you guys want. A couple of points on that. The last question is no. You have two key points in here. When it's time for the contract to be awarded, you have to have your CMMC certification. You have to have either your provisional certification or your final certification. The difference between those two is if you get assessed and you didn't pass everything, but you're in the allowed POAM window, so you have a provisional certification, you can win a contract. That's a difference that was in this that I was surprised by. So that's one part of it, but the timeline's the more important thing. So you have the 32 CFR rule that just came out that implements the CMMC program, that implements the assessments. We will be able to begin assessments once this becomes effective. The other rules, the Title 48 CFR rule, that controls the procurement side of it. That controls when it can go into contracts. So one big change that came out in this is the first phase that kicks off once Title 48 is effective is now a year long instead of 6 months. So there's a longer window to get prepared and to be ready, and they extended that self-assessment timeframe. Title 48 won't go into effect until next year. It literally just finished up at the same time on the 15th. It's public comment period. So they still have to adjudicate the comments, put out a final rule we expect, and then get that through the system. So there's still some time left, so to speak, to get going, but probably get going if you're not already soon. Yesterday.
Yeah, I want to clarify some of this too, because there's a lot of dates. 32 CFR, what we just saw, that is the law of the land after 60 days. Congress, during their congressional review, have 60 days of a congressional period during which they can do something with that. We don't expect them to. That Congress has essentially asked for this, but that's a different 60-day window. This technically takes effect December 15th. But Congress then has their own 60-day window. Then there's another time frame. That's 48 CFR. That's got to come through before we can put it in contracts. Yet a third time frame. When 48 CFR is done and finalized, we will see it in contracts. But here's what's really driving the business. Primes don't want to wait for all their subs to go get certified. They are telling them, go do this now, which you can do either voluntarily through the JSVA prior to this rule or now with a C3PAO, and you should, because primes, and I've been to the industry days where the primes are saying, if you don't tell me where you are in the C3PA, in the CMMC process, the certification process, we're probably not going to be able to work with you if you can't tell me that you've already started. So there's going to be a pretty big shakeup with subcontractors. The primes have got everything taken care of. Nobody's really worried about them, but the subcontractors need to go get certified now because the primes are the ones who are saying, I want to know you're either in or you're out. So go get your certifications done now. And then even in the rule, it identifies several hundred that during that first phase one will still require a certification. Even though there's a bunch of them that they're saying, yeah, you can still self-certify, self-attest. There are still a number of them identified by the DoD to be determined that they will require an assessment during phase one. So there are lots of timeframes going on, but the bottom line is if you want to take advantage of a tremendous opportunity, the shakeup of all the subcontractors, go get certified soon.
And that's something that is not new for the primes. The primes have been doing that for a while because it's the 7012. It's been required for a while to be compliant. You have to register a SPURS course. So they've been doing that for a while. And we've heard of subcontractors that have lost contracts because the primes won't use them. And so that's happening today. I would anticipate that it will accelerate. And Bob, you know that firsthand because you've worked with some of the larger primes.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And
They have some scoring systems now, right?
right. There's some of them out there that give a green, yellow, red on it. And you're going to think with this being natural law, I think you're going to see a lot more push and everything coming out of the primes to have either some type of rating or wanting to know, like Chris has said, where are you at? We need to know because they're going to start going into their contracts and they can't wait until the last minute to find out that one of their subs can't do it.
Yeah,
Earlier,
the primes are winning the contracts. They have their subs queued up, but if they're because of the flow down, if their subs aren't compliant, they aren't going to be able to deliver until they're certified. Right. So,
And the prime can lose the contract.
Yeah.
Plus be penalized in monetary damages. So the stakes are on the prime. That's why they're demanding this.
Earlier on, there was a lot of concern, a lot of questions about the cost for a small business to get certified. Is there anything in the rules that suggests what the cost should be or what range the vendor should expect to pay to go through the certification process? And if there aren't any rules, what do you suggest? What are the ranges? Because for small businesses, spending $15,000, $30,000, $50,000 it's not an easy thing. Any expectations as to costs?
It is in the rule. I'm going to see if I can find the exact page, but everybody's welcome to peruse this light read at 470 pages. They do break down estimated costs. I think you need to keep in mind they're estimated.
Sure.
It's
Yes.
an area that obviously when you look at, and I just spoke with a C3PAO today who is booked for all of 2024, 2025, all assessments booked out. If you look at that and you say, well, wait, I really need to get an assessment. Now I've got a problem. This again is why you guys need to think about doing it sooner. You in the audience that might be in the DIB. Because some of these C3PAOs are booked out so far, now people are starting to pay a premium more than what the market might have normally been for, I need my assessment because it's a 10 million, put the number at 50 million. We have a client with a $50 million contract that's riding on this. They're going to pay a premium to get in to make sure that they get that contract. And when you look at, oh, wait, it's going to require CMMC. Okay, we're shopping for any C3PAO that will free up space, whatever the cost, to get us in next month. That changes the game. But yes, there's some costs based on the size of the company, small to medium, large companies, based on how much time internally you'll have to dedicate, and the DoD has estimated this out, and how much it will cost externally for getting ready with the guidance from maybe some of the people here in the panel and having the assessment itself, the external cost for both of those.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
can tell you that we work with a lot of small to medium sized companies, and because we work in enclaves, you know, maybe 100-person company, 50-person company that wants it to start with a 5-user enclave, get that certified, right? To establish a beachhead. And we give budgetary numbers out. We can do it very quickly. And we're looking at typically a 5-user, it's maybe 40-ish thousand over a 6-month period because of the number of the amount of inheritance through a virtual desktop solution, through a VDI solution. We can get them there in 6 months, and we can get them there in about the $40,000-$50,000 range, and then you have an ongoing cost after that just for the VDI sessions, which is a monthly per month per user. So you know exactly, but you add that, you add the C3PAO on top of that, and I've heard as much as 60,000-70,000 on the C3PAO, but for these smaller companies, you know, maybe you can get in there for, we've seen 35-40 at the low end, but 60-70 on the high end. And I don't know how this rule is going to impact it, because they have had a major change in there that you have to have 3 assessors on an assessment, not 2. So that was another major change. I don't know if one of the Kelly or Chris want to address that, but that was a major change as well.
Yeah, I'll jump into the cost. We've been doing a lot of quotes. We get a lot of activity even before the rule dropped last week. With a phenomenal amount of incoming calls on assessment costs. One, because we're one of the very few West Coast based C3POs right now. So we're getting a lot of activity, and I can tell you on quotes that have gone out that I've heard through the industry, that I've heard from other people, they've ranged for what we call not a small business. That doesn't matter. It's the assessment scope is how we base pricing. So small assessment scope, medium, large assessment scope have averaged between 30,000 and 45,000 is what I've typically told people when I've talked to them on the phone. Medium assessment scopes are more the 45 to 65 range. Large assessment scopes, I don't even know what those end up being, but massive company, massive enterprise network decides to go for the whole thing. Okay. But I've heard 75,000 plus into 6 figures. I've heard 150,000 plus quotes have been out there. I don't know how they're getting there. I've never come up with one. But in the real gist of probably those who are listening in here, the small businesses to medium businesses, you're probably going to be looking in that 30 to 50 range as a fair estimate. Smaller assessment scope, smaller enclave, smaller amount we have to assess, thus smaller pricing.
And typical timelines for going through the assessment is 6 months, 3 months.
The real time frame is 6 weeks. This is how I explain to people to call. Really, you have some of the upfront, contract negotiation, getting the paperwork, that kind of stuff's taken care of. But 6 weeks out from the actual assessment week is when we start going through a readiness assessment. And it's a go, no-go decision by us as a C3PO to say, okay, we think they've got their ducks in a row. They've got the people allocated, things are ready. We're not reviewing evidence. We're just making sure we believe you're ready to be assessed. And then about 2 weeks out from the actual insanity week, hell week, whatever you want to call it, that's when we need to start getting all documentation. And I mean all, everything you have. Policies, plans, procedures, SSP, etc., screenshots, all of that evidence that you are going to be presenting to us, get in advance, so that the week before the interview week, that's all we're doing. And I'm literally doing one this week. I'm on a JSVA this week, and that's all I'm doing is reviewing documentation this week. Next week is the interview week. So it's really more about a 6-week process. And the whole point about getting in and supply and demand, I think I even saw someone putting that into the Q&A, supply and demand. Yes, the longer you wait, the probably harder it's going to be, because it's going to be harder to get a slot. We are not booked up the entire year, but we've been doing things a little bit differently than some C3POs, where we decided not to immediately take deposits to try to reserve slots yet. We wanted to wait until we knew when the final rule came out and what the actual date was going to be. So yeah, it's supply and demand is really going to come into play here.
So Kelly, the joint surveillances go up until Congress signs off, right? And then Congress signs off, that date's finalized. The day after that, you can do an assessment without being joined.
It won't be the Congress date. It'll be just the effective date. And I actually posted a screenshot of that into the chat. Hopefully it came through when you guys can verify, but it shows the effective date for just the actual final rule. And that's December 16th. That will be the date that at the most immediate, we would be allowed to start assessments. There's some things that still have to happen to where we'll actually be able to. But up until that day, joint surveillance voluntary assessments will keep going because they are going to convert. If you pass them, they will convert now for sure into a CMMC level 2 certification. So they're literally running them all the way up. Now, I can tell you there are several that are getting canceled. I have the one I'm not didn't get canceled, but there have been several, as I've heard, that have gotten canceled because they just said, oh, okay, it's not that far out. Let's just wait and we'll have the normal CMMC assessment instead of the DIBCAC assessment. So yeah, interesting times.
And there's some reasons why people might cancel them. We've seen some inconsistent results with the JSVAs. So
Yes.
One of the most beautiful things
And
about
scheduling.
CMMC, and what was that, Kelly?
Scheduling. It's a
Scheduling,
lot
but
harder
also,
to get JSV scheduled.
yeah, it's harder to schedule. We've seen inconsistent results. We've seen, like a platform that passed 12 times in a row, the 13th time didn't pass with the JSVA. So some people are a little nervous about them. Here's what I love about CMMC, and I think every contractor needs to understand the tremendous power of this. You get to pick your C3PAO. Find one that, if you're having some guidance, work with the team that's giving you guidance to find out who are some of the good ones out there. Who is it? And I'm not talking about easy. That's not, I'm saying ones that really look at this, understand this, and are like-minded to the guidance you're getting. Because you want to be able to take your assessment package, all this work that you've put into it, put it in front of a team that is going to be skillfully looking at this and not giving random decisions, that we know what the answers look like. And unfortunately, that has not always been the case in the JSVAs. So that's what I think is critical about all of you in this. No, don't just interview for price. Interview your C3PAOs using whoever you have on your team right now as a guide for, yes, this person really knows what they're doing, or this team.
Okay. How have the FedRAMP requirements changed in this new rule? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a couple different areas. One of them is security protection data, security protection assets, and that's still a little fuzzy. What it states is that security protection data requires protection commensurate with the CUI it protects. So FedRAMP requirements for handling security protection data is therefore the same as that of handling CUI, right? Stores, process, or transmits data. So what that means is it's deferring to DFARS clause 252, 204, and I'm reading this 7012, which requires protection of security protection assets and SPD, and applies only to components of non-federal systems that process, store, transmit CUI, and that provide security protection for such components.
Okay.
Here's a critical change, and this is a big topic. Anybody who's been following this knows FedRAMP has been huge, and then the DoD interpreted equivalency in a memo that came out in January, which blew everybody away, and was essentially equivalency means you score a perfect score on FedRAMP moderate. But what the DoD did with this rule is reconsidered based on comments again, and to Kelly's point, good, they were listening. Based on comments, they previously defined what a cloud service provider and it was very overreaching. They reeled that in. So in the rule, and I'm going to read, an ESP is considered a cloud service provider when it provides its own cloud services based on a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing, here's what that means. When we previously thought all these smaller software packages that contractors were using might have to go get FedRAMP, we started telling everybody, you better ask them where they are. If they're not FedRAMP authorized, they are not going to be able to be used because the DoD considers that a cloud service provider, a CSP. They've reeled into that definition, excuse me, that definition, and a lot of these are no longer considered a CSP. Work with your team on what you're using to make sure, because if it's a CSP, if it is still considered a cloud service, you will need to get that FedRAMP. But they've since reeled in the definition enough that a lot of us that previously were giving guidance, oh my goodness, you got to go get certified, FedRAMP authorized, no longer do it. So that's a good thing. Here's the other thing that is happening in the background, and it's not in writing, but the DoD knows that the FedRAMP equivalent memo was a disaster. And I had the opportunity to meet in person and ask questions of David McCune last week. He is the one who wrote the memo and the CIO of the DoD. What he said was, yeah, that was kind of a disaster. We are most likely, I think he said, we are in the process of changing that FedRAMP equivalent. And where he indicates they are heading is equivalency is going to get killed off. Let's see what comes in writing. We've heard a lot about this FedRAMP equivalency. Let's see what they actually do. The way that they're going to do it, according to him, is through DFARS 7012. They're going to rewrite that, and that's where the current, quote, equivalent language lives. If that is killed off, they've done two things. They've made it easier for those that are not just doing the ubiquitous kind of cloud service providing. So you guys don't have to get FedRAMP. But secondly, they've made it very clear, if you are a CSP, you need to go in and make sure it's FedRAMP authorized. And I would guide now clients knowing that equivalency is probably not a good path. So if you have somebody who says they're equivalent, and there's some packages out there, software packages that store data or whatever, I would be worried about equivalency only, because that may go away.
And that means be sponsored, right? It
must be sponsored.
Be listed in the marketplace, correct?
That's
for FedRAMP.
Yep.
Okay. There is some talk about phase implementation plan for CMMC, the CMMC program. How does the phase rollout affect different types of contracts and entities? Is that a known entity at this point, or is that not real?
Yeah, I don't know that you can predict which contracts will or which contracts won't include the CMMC requirement. It is supposed to be a phased rollout. If that's what is that what you're alluding to? Is that
yes,
how it's going to be phased into contracts? I don't know that you can predict, but I mean, you're rolling the dice if you think you're going to be the one. What you're going to be on one of the contracts that aren't.
Okay.
That doesn't have a CMMC requirement right away. And kind of to Chris's point again, I think the primes are going to drive more than the DoD on this, because they aren't going to want to take the risks.
Okay. Okay. So we've had a lot of, there seems to be a lot of questions being asked by our audience. Anything in those questions that we want to share with, I know, Robert, you've been monitoring.
Yes.
Anything
they go about the cost. And, the one thing, the big cost that is not going to go down is a C3PAO, and it's a supply demand. As you go along with it, and just imagine, they're trying to do the best they can. They'll try to hold their costs in line, but as they get busy and they see that maybe, I don't know, there's more to it or whatever, I just don't see those costs coming down, which I think Kelly will probably back up. But it's the other thing of what you can do to make sure that you aren't paying it twice. Get somebody in who knows what they're doing, CCP, CCA, et cetera, and has gone through some of these with small, large, or whatever, to help point out what you need to do on it. That's so important. I've seen, and I've gone up to where people say, oh, we did our self-assessment, we're good. And you go up there and there are just items they don't think of, because in actuality, it's an audit. So maybe they didn't prep their artifacts right, so that the artifacts aren't really representing truly their environment. Maybe their procedures don't have what's there, because if they read procedures one way and they see you doing it another way, that doesn't work.
Okay.
There's a lot more to it than what you think. But then, Kelly, you can back up as far as C3PAO costs. I know you brought that up before, but did you see those coming down at any time?
Probably not. And just to give you guys an idea of how simple the cost structure is, I'll tell you exactly how I've calculated it. I won't use all the numbers, but I'll tell you how I've calculated it. It's simple. How many assessors, how many hours, and how much per hour. I mean, it's a very simple calculation that's behind this, all things considered. So we have a set process. We know what to do. We know how much time it's going to take. It's a very simple calculation. So I don't see the cost coming down in any substantial way. I thought if anything major changed in this final rule that could change how we do the assessments one way or the other, it could have made it more expensive if they would have added more stuff. Could have made it cheaper hypothetically if they could have reduced. I didn't see anything, and I haven't heard anything from anybody else in the C3PO community that has said, oh yeah, it's going to be much cheaper. It'll take us half the time to do it now. That would have been nice. That would have been surprising. But at least it also didn't add a bunch of stuff, which is what I was worried about. That would have made it even more expensive. So yeah, I don't see costs coming down. I see initially a massive swell in the beginning for the first at least few months of all the companies that are rushing to try to get assessed first, paying a premium. Like I think, I can't remember Chris or Bob that mentioned that, but
Right.
Paying a premium for that. Slowly over time, that's going to ease out then. But then you also have reassessments eventually. So yeah, I don't see it coming down.
Another thing I want the people to understand with this is that, this isn't a once and done. You have two factors to think about with it. One, it's every 3 years. Then the other thing, your president board have to validate every year that, yes, we're still compliant. And that's where I provide, my clients a management workbook so that there's a central point for the C3PO to go and see all the soft controls that they're managing, the users, the training, CUI, the policies, and a sign off for the, president, all together in one, so that it makes it easier for you. And that's where, if you can make it easier for the C3PAO and hopefully maybe reduce costs, maybe they might budge a little bit for you. The other thing, it will give your company ease within the whole audit process, knowing that, okay, now we have a process to continually be compliant, and you get the environment, your company in that environment. This is a big change. I remember with Sarbanes-Oxley in 2004-5 came out, the companies were up in the air about all these regulations, this, all has to be done. And you want to be able to get your entire company comfortable with it, so it becomes second nature. And that will show up when the C3PAO comes. If they see a calm and confident firm that they're working with, it's going to go so much easier, and then ongoing as well.
Yeah, I think that, Phil, there's one more thing I wanted to mention is that resources like Kelly and Chris that are certified assessors, there's going to be a shortage because they put in new restrictions, and it's if you aren't cleared, it's going to take you 8 months to get certified, and that's way longer than it's taken in the past. If you are cleared, it still take you about 4 months. So
Okay.
we are going to be resource constrained. We're not going to be necessarily C3PAO constrained, but the resources behind them it's going to take longer for them to get ramped up.
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Lots of manufacturers have overseas operations, or they could be a wholly owned subsidiary of a European armament manufacturers.
Okay.
How does the CMMC program
Well,
apply?
Phil, one thing real quick. I've seen down in some commentary, the poll is not working.
Okay.
So I think you've had a couple questions out and people can't respond.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so maybe work in the background and go ahead with the question again. Sorry.
Absolutely. Thanks. Well, how does the CMMC program apply to international entities, or entities that are international and have U.S. Subsidiaries? And that probably goes more for manufacturers than anything else.
If it's the DoD, and this is going to start rolling out at other agencies, that's confirmed. If it's the DoD data right now, and it flows down to a prime, and the prime flows it down to other subs, you follow the data. If it's CUI, you've got to be level 2. It's that simple. It doesn't matter where that subcontractor is located. They have to comply with the US laws for the DoD. If you look at Canada right now, they're implementing almost the exact same thing, except they leapfrogged us. They're doing 171 revision 3 for their CMMC program, which they're calling CPCSC. The Canadians are going to likewise say, okay, here all our primes are going to have flow down requirements based on 171 revision 3, and wherever their subs are located, same thing. They're going to have to go through a Canadian assessment. So they're rolling out the same thing. UK is coming behind, Japan, Australia. These are all countries that we have partnerships and relationships with that are requiring basically the same thing that we've established in their own countries. So it is international, and it is going to be a pretty unified effort.
Chris, do you think there's going to be some reciprocation of, so if it's a Canadian requirement and you have a U.S. branch that's delivering for a Canadian DoD project, then will they have to go through a Canadian assessment, or will that reciprocate, or maybe you don't know?
Well, it depends on the countries and the treaties. They've left that open to iron out. Yes, I think they will, especially if they're both based on, the same standard. But in the case of Canada, interestingly, they are rolling out. They're not starting with 171 revision 2, which is where we are. And we're there until the DoD says otherwise. So people speculate that could be a year or more, because they're going to have to change the rule. The rule very clearly said 171 revision 2, which currently has been withdrawn and replaced with revision 3. So Canada said, we're just going to take revision 3 and start our program there. So with that, the requirements are technically different for Canada. So you may see a discrepancy there that they don't recognize our assessments. We'll have to see.
Okay. So that kind of expand upon that. What is the how do the rules align? How does the CMMC new rule align with NIST 800, 170, 171? If you do the work to complete your NIST 800, 171 assessment, how much of that is duplicated when you're going after your CMMC? What is
171 is the framework for CMMC.
Okay.
So it's 171 plus 171A, which gives you all of your objectives. There are 320 objectives total in revision 2, as it stands that we're implementing for CMMC. But that is not the current 171 that the NIST has just revised earlier this year.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. So there is quite a lot of information regarding the CMMC, the final rule. So it would probably take a little while for the community to kind of ingest all of those rules and figure out what it actually means. In terms of self-education, what do you suggest the community do to bring itself up to speed? Just download those 400 pages? What resources do you advise people follow? What are credible resources for that, for understanding how to go about getting assessed?
I think the best thing you can do is align with somebody who's trained by the DoD, and that would be your certified CMMC professionals or assessors.
Okay.
There are some other professionals in the community. I personally recommend you look for the higher trained ones, CCPs and CCAs. Although there are RPs and RPAs that are very skilled, they can help implement. They will never be on an assessment team per the rules. They're not going to see how these controls are actually assessed. And so I think they miss out on what we get to see as assessors, which is how the sausage gets made, how people get through assessments. So I would recommend having your company reach out to somebody who is at that level. They're sitting on these assessments and they can advise you the best. Here's what you guys need to do.
Okay. Yeah, I can tell you, we hear a lot from, and just real quick, we hear a lot from these small to medium-sized businesses where leadership passes down, hey, we have to be CMMC compliant. They throw it down to IT and say, make it happen, right? And they're like, okay, there's a technology aspect, but then the real heavy lift for these IT professionals are the policies, procedures, everything else that's involved. And Bob, Chris, and Kelly can speak to that way better than I can. Yet, that to me is that's where they start reading through this like, well, we can't do. I mean, this is going to take forever. So they have to go find a professional, to Chris's point.
Right, a professional with history. It's one thing to go through the exam, but it's another thing, like Kelly, Chris, and I have that wealth of experience behind us, because that's going to help you in determining some critical points that may be within your environment that other people just aren't quite sure how to really handle and deal with, and then be able to have that noted and presented correctly in your policies and procedures.
Okay, great.
Number one way to fail an assessment is policies and procedures right now.
Yes, that's right. That's
be
why
careful.
I brought that up. Yep.
So we have just a couple of minutes left. What topics did we not cover? I know we had a kind of a wide-ranging conversation. It is a wide-ranging topic. What did we miss, or what do you want to leave our audience with?
I think we covered a lot.
We covered a lot, but the thing is, VDI, that's something that I was very happy to see, where that can really help reduce the scope for an OSC, especially the smaller ones. It's a really big advantage because, Steve, what's the inheritance on that of the controls?
That's a good point. We didn't really talk about inheritance. That with the Lifeline solution, you inherit fully or partially 90%. We're 60% full inheritance, 30% partial. And the partial is, you define, we execute. And then the 10% is mostly physical, or what, like a manufacturing plant with a CNC machine with a Windows 7 solution tied up into it. So, that's a huge component. And if you can inherit, and you take those endpoints out of scope, that's huge. And that's how you get there quickly. Yeah. And a lot of companies come to us to get there inexpensively and quickly.
The other thing I would throw out that we haven't talked about yet is be careful out there. There are a lot of people that realize what opportunity the word CMMC means, and they're offering services and they're just not skilled. So Be really careful. Look for them on the Cyber AB. There's a marketplace where you can find all the people who have gone through the training.
Yep,
And,
the CCP, CCAs.
Yeah,
Yep.
people will sell you all kinds of stuff telling you it's going to help you. And we're seeing more and more of that right now, which is tragic. Just be careful.
Yeah,
Sure.
watch
when
if
you
they
see that
have it in a
inheritance-
bottle and they're on a little wagon.
Okay.
And I know
So-
we're done, but yeah, exactly. See, when you see the inheritance, ask for the shared responsibility matrix.
Okay.
That's critical piece. So
Fantastic. This has been a very informative session. What we're going to do is obviously release this webinar on our YouTube channel. We're also going to everyone that attend or registered, we are going to put contact information for our panelists in that email that we're going to distribute to everyone. And again, thank everyone for their attendance. This has been, as usual, a very informative discussion. And I think there are lots of webinars out there now. This panel has years of experience predating CMMC, but all around cybersecurity. So I think this is one of the most experienced and informative panels that you're going to find. And again, we're going to make contact for these individuals accessible to you. And again, thank you for your time this morning. You have a wonderful day.